So let's talk about Natasha's law, or prospective Natasha's law, and then also give you a case study, also anonymised in relation to a matter I'm currently dealing with. And then finally just talk to you a little bit about risk analysis as far as it relates to food arrangements. And I apologise, I'm having to look to my left there from time to time because I haven't got my slides in front of me, I'm afraid. So, just dealing with the Food Information Regulations 2014. I'm sure all of you, most of you in this room certainly will be fully aware of this coming and following an EU directive in 2014. The regulations, however, only apply to England. They do not apply to the rest of the United Kingdom. But the Foods Standards Agency, the Food Safety Agency, have actually made an advisory for Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland to follow the same regulations in relation to their businesses. So it's advisory in relation to those only, but it has no statutory effect or force. So this then effectively goes to 14 prescribed allergens. I'm not going to go through them, I'm sure all of you are probably aware of them. It's interesting to say, however, that in Europe we have 14. In the USA they only have 8. So it's the top 8. They looked at the top 8 statistically, from the statistic information they had, looked at the top 8 food allergens in the USA, and they made those prescriptive, but that was back in 2006. It's a long time before we actually had this in 2014. It's interesting, in fact, that sesame seeds is the 9th in the USA, so it isn't actually covered. You don't actually have to put sesame seeds as being an ingredient on any of their labelling at the moment. But there is a big action group, as I understand, in the USA, which is looking to try and change that and make that law. So I'm only going to talk about the pre-packed direct exemption, which is part of the regulations, and which is effectively what the tragic case involving Prince was all about. So this is the exemption which applies to any food that is produced, made up on the premises and then sold at those premises, as opposed to being made elsewhere, manufactured, brought in. So the exemption is that that particular type of foodstuff does not need to have any sort of labelling on it, because the concept being that the food would be essentially made in front of you, manufactured in front of you, like they do at Subway, where you can ask for certain ingredients to be added, make up your own sandwich or baguette or whatever it is, and therefore the customer would have the opportunity to ask the person making up the food exactly what was in it, or to tell them about any issues they had with allergies or intolerances, and then get that information direct. So there was no requirement for labelling. So that was the intention behind that exemption from the legislation. Of course, the possibly unexpected consequence was that you have these very large businesses, such as Pratts, and also Greggs, and other companies as well, very large chains of businesses, which are using that pre-packed exemption because they are essentially making up their products on the premises. So they're either being baked and or put together, manufactured, essentially prepared at the point of sale, but pre-prepared for the point of sale. So they're not actually being made up for the insistence of the customer for a specific order. They're made up on the premises on that day, and they're then sold on as a pre-packaged item. So those items did not have to be labelled. They do not have to be labelled. And in fact, with the tragic case with Prince, that was the case, and therefore they were exempt from having to label the item specifically, as long as they had allergen information available. If asked for, they didn't actually have to label the product at all. And that was one of the criticisms that was made at by the coroner in relation to the Pret case. So once they weren't doing anything illegal or unlawful, the court of public opinion certainly would suggest that they should have done more. I'm not going to talk anything more about the law because I think all of you are quite aware of the regulations, and I don't want to cover those issues. I've got quite a knowledgeable audience, I believe. In relation to this proposed Natasha's law, this is obviously the parents of Natasha, the young French girl that died because of the food allergy with the sesame seed and her baguette, having bought it from Pratts. Her parents obviously have lobbied the government, have raised significantly the awareness around the whole issue, bear in mind how well publicised that whole tragic event was. And they've actually met with Michael Gove, and I believe that he has made certain assurances, and he's very concerned about trying to do something to change the legislation because he doesn't feel that it's currently fit for purpose. That's essentially what he has said, I'm paraphrasing there. So he said he's going to urgently look at the possibility of changing the legislation to try and improve information that's provided to members of the public and customers at these sort of premises where there is this pre-packed exemption currently. So where does that leave us? Well, we don't actually know what's going to be proposed, other than that the legislators are going to look at it. My understanding is that there has to be a consultation process, and that's probably going to start early next year, according to what the government are telling us at the moment, and my colleagues will elaborate on that, my other speakers will elaborate on that, as I understand it, so they seem to have much better information in that regard. So we don't know what the timing is going to be as to when the legislation may change and what those changes might be, and then there again, what the impact that may have on all of your businesses, but in particular in those small to medium businesses, which were, I believe, the intention of the original legislation was to cover those very small businesses, which are essentially those small sandwich shops, those small businesses producing food on the premises, possibly to order and for immediate sale. And those are the businesses which obviously the government was probably concerned to try and avoid having additional bureaucracy and red tape around in terms of sales of these items. So what's the impact going to be for those small businesses? Well, unfortunately, none of us know at the moment because we don't know what the legislation is going to change to. My initial feelings about this were that they could quite simply change the legislation to make it exempt from those businesses which were particularly small. So you could limit it to businesses where they had more than a certain number of employees, I don't know, arbitrarily 10, 15 employees, etc. And in that way, those small family-owned, small sandwich shops, etc., would not be impacted by any change to the legislation. They'd still have that exemption. But what I'm told by my colleagues at the table over there, and certainly my understanding is that the government's reluctant to do that, or saying they can't do that, and I'm not quite sure why, because we have a lot of other legislation which exactly does that. It exempts small businesses, it limits the impact of statutory regulation where there is a very low number of employees. So why can't they do that in this instance? I don't understand quite why, but apparently they're reluctant to do that, and they're saying it has to be directly related to food type. So it is a real issue, and hopefully you'll hear a lot more about that from the following speakers, but I'm not quite sure how the government is going to get around that, how the legislation is going to adapt or change so that it doesn't impact unfairly and disproportionately those very small businesses. I know that some of the ideas that have coming through, especially from the anaphylaxis campaign, seem to me to be very practical, and you'll hear more about that shortly, so I'm not going to cover it. But I think it's very intelligent and very practical advice and suggestions that they've come up with in terms of lobbying the government over this, and we'll hear more about that shortly. I just want to say something about perspective, and to put this all into a little bit of perspective. We're all here today because of some very recent tragic events, I suspect, and it's probably unlikely that this event would have taken place had it not been for the young girl who tragically died because of the PrEP case. I suspect that this would not have been as high up in terms of your priorities, in terms of issues that you're dealing with, in terms of brand, potential damage to your brands, and or potential issues that you're having in your various businesses, but for that case. So I just want to sort of sound a bit of perspective really around that. The first thing is to say that I'm sure that Preps that were here, and I don't have anything to do with them, but I'm sure that they would say in their defence that they serve hundreds of thousands, possibly more, in terms of customers every year. And this is a single incident that's occurred, as tragic as it is. But it has to be put into that perspective that they are serving very, very many customers, hundreds of thousands of people who seem to have either had sufficient information or asked for sufficient information at point of sale. If they have allergens or intolerances, and they've had no serious issues. They certainly had no other deaths relating to the labelling issue, if I can put it that way, although I do understand that they've had a number of other allergy-related illnesses. I think the other point about perspective is a bit of personal responsibility. And I've talked to a few people this morning, actually. It's quite interesting because I think that we're probably all agreed that those people who have a particular food intolerance or a food allergen, the burden must be on them to make that known to the places or premises that they're intending to eat at. So inform the staff and make sure that whatever they order, that they do as much, so far as they can, as much due diligence in terms of checking the ingredients of the products or the meals that they're intending to eat. And that's obviously by looking online in terms of any information that's available from those premises with regard to allergens, but also in asking staff and making staff aware that they have these intolerances and all these allergens, and that the chef should be informed that their meal is being prepared for someone with those issues. Now, it seems to me that most people who do have certainly serious intolerances or allergens are actually very good at this, because they're very self-aware. But I think there is a suggestion that people who do have some sensitivity perhaps aren't as risk-aware as they should be, or don't take the adequate steps to to inform the businesses that they're eating at or tend to eat at of those issues. And I think that's something that people need to be more aware of, and they need to be making sure that they actually give that information to those businesses. This is currently a case that I'm dealing with at the moment, so it's an interesting one. And until this year, I certainly had not come across pea protein as an allergy issue. So if you have heard of this, then please put your hand up. Anybody else come across pea protein as an allergy? No, well, that's interesting, because I'd have thought that I'd have thought there'd be someone in the room, or a bigger group. There was one person, was there? One person has, okay. I thought that within this group of people, especially given the businesses that you're all in, that more of you would actually be aware of this. So we have a customer who comes in, is a regular customer. He obviously makes, this is his case anyway, he makes the staff aware that he has a pea protein allergy. And he asked to order a certain meal. I've called it a pie meal here. It must not necessarily be a pie meal, but I've had to anonymise this for obvious reasons. So he orders, in ordering his meal, he tells the waiter, the waitress, I have a pea protein allergy. Can you please confirm that this particular product doesn't contain any of this? Can you check with the kitchen? And surprisingly, you might think that they come back and say, yes, it's fine, this product is absolutely fine for you, there's no pea protein content in this product. So he served his meal, and then subsequently develops illness. It's not too severe, he's not dead, he's not hospitalised or anything like that, he has a severe allergic reaction, which he then believes is due to consumption of this meal. He goes back to complain. When they check with the kitchen, this is again his case, is that he's informed that the kitchen staff tell him that there was some sort of cross-contamination issue, there was some sort of spillage, some accidental problem, which has resulted in another product contaminating his meal or part of the ingredients for his meal. Now, bearing in mind, as with a lot of these sort of fast food type places, this is a product that's really made and bought in. It's not manufactured on the premises, it's not made food, it's not cooked to order in that sense. So he goes away, there's no suggestion of him making any sort of claim or anything like that. But after several weeks he comes back and decides to order the same meal again. You may think he's a glutton for punishment in this regard. So he orders the same meal, consumes his pie, and then has another severe, even more severe allergic reaction. Only to find out, as you can see from what's on the screen, that the product ingredients have changed, and now pea protein is used in the manufacture of that product. So this sort of highlights a number of issues for your businesses, really. in terms of what information, if any, do you give to customers who are asking about unusual or non-prescribed allergens, such as pea protein, and there are a number of other allergies which I understand which are very much on the increase now, one of them being buckwheat, I believe, kiwi fruit. Someone was telling me this morning that their mother was allergic to aubergine, and I've not heard of that one before either. But certainly strawberries are in there, and there are no doubt many others as well. So these are various non-prescribed allergens which we know are out there, and certainly the anaphylaxis campaign and others will be fully aware. They'll get reports of this quite regularly, of these newer type or certainly rising cases involving these other food stuffs. So what do you do? What do you do when customers ask about this? Because this won't be in your information online. This won't be on your allergen cards, which are only dealing with the 14 prescribed allergens. Will your staff, will your kitchen staff even know what's in these products? They may well not. They may not be the people who are actually dealing with the suppliers, who are doing the due diligence of suppliers to understand what the ingredients are. So you may not be able to actually give any information. There may just be a simple waiver that you have to say, I'm sorry, I just don't know. And you eat the product at your own risk. You order the product at your own risk. And I know that tends to be what a lot of businesses are doing these days anyway, in relation to any sort of allergen, whether it's prescribed or not. So it is a real issue for you. The other problem is this cross-contamination issue. And I was talking to a few of you in the audience this morning before we started, and basically the point is this, that no matter how good your systems are, no matter how good your information is, no matter how much information you do have, no matter how much information you post online and how accurate that is, at the end of the day you're in a busy kitchen and you are dealing with hundreds of different products and or ingredients. You are always at risk of there being product contamination. It's just basic human error. So even if you have very good protocols within your kitchens to try and avoid this in terms of storage and food preparation and cooking and production and service, there is always going to be that risk. And I don't see how you can ever overcome the risk. And I think that's something that you do probably have to await for in terms of informing customers and members of the public that in a busy kitchen where you do have various food allergens, that there will always be an ever-present risk of cross-contamination, and that the customer needs to be aware of that. I just want to prepare this slide. I can't remember everything that's in every service. I'm probably not going to have time to go through all of them. But I thought we'd have a little bit of an interactive exercise here, get you on your feet anyway. So all of those in the audience who have a business which has a HACCP plan, has an analysis of critical control points, can you please stand up if you're in a business and you have a HACCP plan? So that's a good, I think, probably 80% plus of the audience. Right, so if your HACCP plan does not include something about food allergens, some sort of detailed analysis about food allergens, can you sit down? Nobody sat down. Wow. So either everyone was too afraid to sit down, which may be the case, or you already do. If you don't have a separate risk assessment dealing with food allergens, in addition to or as part of your HACCP plan, sit down. So it sounds like everybody else then has got all of this covered, and I don't know why you're here really, because obviously dealing with everything properly. Okay, thank you very much, you can sit down. That's pretty good. I mean, that's, I would say, the majority of the audience, certainly stood up originally, by far, anyway, already have this in their minds and already thinking about this and having covered to some extent. So the HACCP plan's got to be the starting point for all this in terms of risk assessment and your controls and what you do about this. And obviously, most of you, it seems, have already got that covered. But in addition to that, you do need to be thinking about food allergens as some sort of a separate risk assessment to cover it in further detail. and have that as part of and alongside your hazard plan. And I mention these things because these are the things that, if you have an issue, if you have a problem, if you have an illness, you have your local authority or EHO come around to ask you about it, then these are the things that obviously they'll want to see, which you need to have available and make sure that it's up to date. So cross-contamination I've already covered to some extent. I just want to talk about staff training, because this is a massive issue, a huge issue for especially the larger businesses, but probably also for the smaller businesses as well. In terms of how much information do you give your staff, how much training do you give them in relation to food allergies and intolerances, and how to deal with customers at point of sale. How do they respond to queries and questions? Again, some of the things I was hearing this morning from some of you was about issues not just with food allergens, but generally about what's in the food. People are much more, if I can put it this way, fussy or fatty about what they might want in their food or not want in their food. And they ask about recipes or dishes being changed to suit them, not necessarily because of some sort of intolerance or insensitivity about the food, just because they don't want to eat certain things. And that's a really difficult problem for you, especially in most of your businesses where you're preparing meals 24 hours or more ahead, where there is all that preparation time, especially for my friends in the Indian cuisine businesses that are here, etc. So it's just not pragmatic, it's not possible. But these are the sort of requests that you're getting on a sort of daily basis, especially when you have a large turnover of people coming through. And how do you deal with those individuals? What do you tell your staff to do? How do you treat them? What should they tell them? What can they say to them? And all of this obviously is part of the training issues that you have. But also, beyond that, what do you tell them about prescribed allergens? And what information can or should they give? Should they give a general disclaimer? Should everything be, well, this may contain this, but also a general disclaimer that we can't guarantee anything? I think that beyond the cross-contamination, which I think is always ever present and should be given as a disclaimer, I think that staff training should obviously include detailed information about prescribed food allergens, and that your staff should be giving that information freely and willingly to any customer who asks for it. They should have appropriate sheets of information they can rely on that's updated in relation to all of your food that you're serving, in terms of all of your products and or ingredients, sources, etc. But there has to be that caveat that there is a possibility of cross-contamination. So it's not stated within the ingredient list, so the customer may feel that they're happy to order it. They must do so knowing that they're eating that product at their own risk, because there is always going to be some element of potential for cross-contamination. And I think that comes back to the individual in terms of deciding whether or not they want to take that chance and eat at your premises or possibly go elsewhere. Okay, so that's me done. I think we're taking questions at the end of the Q&A session. Thank you very much.